This is Amy Poehler. My new movie, Disney and Pixar's Inside Out 2, is coming to theaters June 14th, and it's making me feel joy and sadness and anger, definitely some disgust, and I think a little fear. But I'm also feeling these new emotions like anxiety, embarrassment, envy, and ennui.
It's what you call the boredom.
Okay, that one was weird. It's gonna be the feel everything movie of the summer. Disney and Pixar's Inside Out 2, rated PG, parental guidance suggested. Only in theaters June 14th. Get tickets now.
Welcome to the RuPaul's Drag Race Recap Show for All-Stars Season 8, Episode 7, titled Forensic Queens. Forensic, I don't know what I'm saying. My name is Joe Betance, and I am joined, as always, by a criminal co-host from the podcast Pod is my co-pilot. Please say...
I'm a professional. Yeah. I'm a professional.
To Mr. Taylor, the Latte Boy. Hello, Taylor.
Hey, Joe. How are you?
We had a little bit of a technical snafu earlier. Did you hear that, Taylor? Did you hear the clip this time?
I did.
Did you predict?
And I am a professional.
Did you predict that clip?
I did not.
Oh, because when I picked, I'm like, this is really on the nose. He'll pick this one. I really thought you would have.
And I thought for sure you were going to say an eloquent co-host.
Oh, that would have been a good one. I couldn't think of something, but I didn't. Oh, that would have been a good one.
Let's start it over. Take 3.
Yeah, start the whole show over again. By the way, I haven't mentioned this in a while. But, we have this thing called Patreon. And I want to say specifically, and if you were in the This Joe Betance tier, you got so much content this week. They got, oh my God, like every episode, that's my personal journal podcast. But there were so many things that happened between my visit to the first official Disney Gay Pride event, to having to watch my nieces, to seeing an old comedian that when I was 12 used to annoy me. It was a whole thing. So you heard all about that it's the whole thing. You just heard about it on This Joe Betance. And you can get that over at Patreon. But patreon.com/afterthoughtmedia. You guys are missing out this week. The girls are girling. Alexis Michelle cries, Kahana tries to quit, and RuPaul takes the girls to church. For the Maxi Challenge, the girls improv their way through a true crime acting challenge, and on the runway, the category is Miss Fill in the Blank. On the main stage, Lala Ree is named the top all-star of the week, while Kahana Montrese and Alexis Michelle are placed in the bottom 2. Later, Lala Ree goes up against Georges. What season is she? Season 14?
Yes.
In a lip sync.
Season 13.
I don't know.
Season 13?
I don't know what she's.
What was the last season? Was season 14, right?
The last one was season 15.
Oh, then it was season 14.
Oh, in a lip sync battle for their legacies. In the end, Lala Ree won the lot. Oh, okay. Here, I kind of phonetically spelled out. In the end, Lala Ree won the lottery and the chance to send one of the girls home. When the lipstick was revealed, Kahana Montrese was sent home packing. Taylor the Latte Boy, share your thoughts about that lip sync between Georges and Lala Ree. And did Lala Ree send the right person home? What are your thoughts here?
I would say I was excited for Lala Ree to actually be the winner. One, because it was somebody different, but also I figured we were going to get a good lip sync. Mm-hmm. When the curtain went up and it was Georges, I got really excited. I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. It was probably the best lip sync of the season, but it wasn't necessarily an unforgettable lip sync. I'm surprised that they said Lala won just because of how often they were showing Georges. Usually they show the one they kind of want to lead you to see who the winner is. But the one thing that I think was different between the two of them was Lala seemed joyous while she was performing, whereas Georges just sort of seemed like she was just doing all of her moves that she normally does, other than the ghost punch.
Out of it. She seemed like she was there like she was forced to be there, and that she was kidnapped or something. Like she was blinking in Morse code to us. I don't know what was going on.
It wasn't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. yeah, she wasn't what I expected it to be when they were performing.
And did the right person go home?
I think there is an argument to be made that Alexis could have gone home this week, just because I think she is the stronger competitor and she was super annoying. Yeah. So that could have been that they would send her home for that. But it was time for Kahana. Kahana obviously did much better this season than she did in her previous season. She is shown to be, to have improved. Mm-hmm. She got her whole storyline within one episode.
Yeah.
Of where she was struggling, she almost quit, and then she ended up doing really well, but she still was the one who went home. It was time. So yeah, I would say it's let's focus on some other people now.
As far as the lip sync goes for me, I already shared that I thought, Georges looked like she was held hostage. I forgot how tiny she is. She was so little next to this Lala Ree that
who's a big girl.
That it looked like it was that forced perspective like they used on like Lord of the Rings. Like it kind of was like, is Georgia standing really? Like, is she where the girls stand when they're gonna send somebody home? But they were standing right next to each other. But she looked like she was so little that she was like standing far away. And
it's like those museums when you go to the museum and it's the room where it has the weird perspective of where when the people cross each other, then one gets bigger and one gets smaller.
Yeah. Like, that's what it looked like because she was so tiny. She was so tiny. I hate bringing things back to this Tears of the Kingdom, but this Link is really tiny, and you'll see him when you're just seeing him running around Hyrule. He doesn't seem that little, but then he's next to normal Hylians, and you're like, oh, he's a tiny person. Thank you.
Elf. He identifies as an elf,
not the alien from the NBC sitcom.
No, not Alf. Elf. Half of the people that listen to the show won't get that reference.
All right. And also, by the way, 100% the right person went home. I've been wanting Kahana to go home for weeks. I will say this, though. As hard as I've been on Kahana, she gave a very graceful exit, and I thought she gave a great exit, and I'm go Kahana on that.
Yeah.
All right. After James's elimination, Candy celebrates her win while the girls admire Jessica's teeth. Later, the queens count the votes against James, and it's unanimous against James. The next day, RuPaul enters the workroom to announce this week's Maxi Challenge. The queens will portray established characters, but improv their lines in a true crime send-up centered around the Season 5 joke doll named Lil Poundcake. In the workroom, the queens read the character descriptions and announce their casting wishes. When Alexis and Lala want the same role, Alexis acquiesces and asks Candy if she would reconsider giving up her own role. Candy refuses, and Alexis backs down and takes a role she didn't want. After giving up the role, Alexis breaks down in tears, and the girls comfort her. Well, all the girls except Candy, who, tired of the drama, stormed off. Alexis left the workroom to take a moment, and the girls got back to work. All right, Taylor, a lot to break down. We'll take this in little pieces. First, Let's talk about everything that happened after James's elimination. Did you have any big notes there?
The one note that I had was Candy saying that she's now a contender for the crown because she has one win, which I'm like, so you're basically saying you're on the same level as Kahana at this point, other than that you don't have any elimination. You don't have any bottom twos yet.
That was Candy's first win?
That was Candy's first win. It's been Kahana, Jimbo, and who was the other one? The one that
Jessica.
That just won. Jessica. Yeah. So I mean, it's really a lot of them haven't won at all.
Interesting. Let me say this: they do the voting, right? And we still never found out why everyone voted for James. They're just like, oh well, that's just a thing that happened that we all voted for James, and I'm like, okay, we still don't know why. Why did you vote for James? Why did everyone vote for James when clearly there's this track record thing and James had a better track? They tried to do, Kahana did have a win or something like that, but there was no explanation why.
I feel like, and we'll talk about this later, there is shit going on with this season that we are not privy to. So I'm wondering if stuff went down with James that wasn't, because even Lala says at her point, she goes, I don't go by track record. I just go with when I want to send a bitch home.
Yeah, and I respect
and she
that.
voted for James too.
Yeah, I respect that.
Yeah.
So Heidi did make like a TikTok or some sort of video promoting her own Patreon, where she was basically saying that, even though she wasn't there, that, she's heard or she guesses that, on the first episode, and we didn't really see this, James kept threatening to quit and was over it. And he was placed very highly, even though he didn't know the steps and didn't know the words. And that the girls always sort of resented him for that. They were sort of waiting for James to be in the bottom. That they never really...
Okay.
That James never... Not well, he should apologize, but like, there was this weird behavior that happened in episode 1 that was never sort of accounted for. And that's sort of where that vote came from. Now let's go to everything that happens in the workroom. RuPaul announces the Maxi Challenge. Kahana is visibly upset that they're having an acting challenge. And then they go to the workroom. And Kahana actually talks about... Oh, no, let's talk about the next... Okay, wait. Yeah. So in the workroom, she talks about the acting challenge and how she's mad that there's an acting challenge and blah, 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 blah. Did you have any... do you have anything to say about that, about Kahana and the acting challenges? Are there too many acting challenges? What about Kahana's reaction? Anything like that?
Kahana's reaction felt very genuine to me, and felt you could see her in her head. Mm-hmm. So often we hear about that with girls, and they try to put on a front or anything. But this was, just shy of like abject terror, where she knew how badly she had done in previous acting challenges. That's her downfall. She's already been in the bottom 3 times. So this just felt, probably, I'm assuming, I'm not in her head, but this just felt like, okay, it's my week to go home, and this really sucks.
It does feel like, look, I'll give Kahana this. There are a lot of acting challenges, and especially this is a good one that's typical of this, that whenever the season does a lot of acting challenges, you're like, oh, they're lazy. Not lazy is not the right word, but they're just not caring. They're over it. They're burned out. And in fact, even this one, they didn't even write a script for their girls. They were like, oh, here's some characters. You make it up. Like you make the story up. Here are the characters. Here's the most basic thread ever. So I get that. There have been a lot of acting challenges, and I do think it comes from a burned out staff and production crew and all that. And they're just like, they don't even give a shit to make decent challenges. That said, bitch, we been done you. This, like, here's the deal. Does Kahana sew? Do we know if she sews?
I don't think so.
So like, what challenge do you want, Kahana? You don't sew. Maybe, we're going to get someone who's like, so the Kahana's a seamstress and you went to fashion school. I don't know this. I don't know, okay? I don't know. I didn't follow. I didn't read Kahana's CV, okay? But it seems like everything she has, she bought, okay? And so what did Kahana want the challenges to be? Does she want it to be all balls? I do. No, does she want it to be nothing but look challenges? Like, which this show has not been that for over 10 years. This show has been that's heavy on performances. Even if it may not be an acting challenge, but it's heavy on either comedy shows or roasts or improv challenges, acting challenges, snatch game. Like, this show has really diminished the look part of it because they have looks all the time. So what did she want this show to be? So that's the one thing I will say is like, well, this is the show you signed up for.
Think about what she won for in week 1. That was the group challenges, the group song challenges, and they talked about her dancing. She's a showgirl. She's a Vegas showgirl. So it makes sense that she is going to perform really well. And even last week with the Joan musical, she did really well as far as her dancing and stuff goes. So I think that anything where she can be physical, that is her forte right now, especially with the focus that you have talked about, particularly with, on her body and all of the plastic surgery she's had and being able to show that off and be very sexy. I think that is what Kahana does well. And she, of course, wants that to be where that gives her an opportunity to get into the spotlight in a good way by showing off her body and showing how well she moves it.
I don't know. It bugged the shit out of me. So then they go to the couches, and the people. I never understood this method for picking roles, but they're like, I want this and I want that, and then there's always inevitably something where like two people want the same role, and from what I gathered is it started with Lala and Alexis wanted the same role, and then Lala wouldn't back down, so Alexis is like, okay, I'll back down, but I also like the role that Candy wanted. Candy, would you be willing to change? And then there was a sort of bitter back and forth. What was your take on this? Before you say anything, the reason I'm really asking Taylor is he wrote a book about this called It's My Turn by Taylor the Latte Boy DDS. It's available on Amazon Kindle and all that. So, like, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first time that I watched it, because they show the first 10 minutes, you can get it on YouTube on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I thought, well, they're both in the wrong here. They're both right and they're both wrong, sort of thing. But then watching it a second time, Candy was kind of right.
Oh,
Candy did a really good job of, I was very surprised that I sided with Candy on this because I was only sort of half watching it on Wednesday, but I didn't realize that Alexis was so like, oh, do you want it? Can I have this role? Oh, I can't have this role? Then it's okay. But then immediately like tried to manipulate and do the passive aggressive thing with Candy as far as, well, this role and the DA role are basically the same role, which they were nothing alike. Mm-hmm. And it was this manipulative piece on Alexis that I did not like. Mm-hmm. Now, Alexis, we also saw the scene from the Mommy Dearest of where she pretty much puts her heels in and says she doesn't, this is the part that she wants, which isn't necessarily that's not up for negotiation. But had Alexis not talked to Lala, who did the same thing, and Alexis be okay with it because she's got the big pants for Lala, that's a problem for me. Yeah.
You made a good point. You kind of sort of, because, my natural inclination is to be anything anti-Candy. And I'm still anti-Candy. And we'll get to that.
Oh, so am I.
Yeah. And, because even when I was recapping the story, I was trying to, figure out in my head, well, how is Candy wrong here? Because I hate her so much. But I was like, because Candy was never involved in the conversation. It was like everybody was fine, and Alexis was debating or arguing or trying to get her way with Lala. That didn't work. So then she just went, well, Candy, you have this role and I want that. And I was like, that's weird. But still, and let's get to this, is then so Alexis, again, she gives in and she takes the role of the DA or whatever. And she starts crying. Now, Alexis on social media, I don't understand how this works because they have a conversation about this later. But Alexis on social media says she was not crying about that argument, that it was something else that wasn't shown. But that doesn't make any sense because then Candy storms off and is like, well, that's what I want to talk about. Then Candy says, I can't with the dramatics. And then she gets up and she dramatically leaves.
Well, Candy Muse is very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of gal. Yeah. So that doesn't surprise me at all.
And then she goes, we're going to cry because we don't get the role we wanted. So which to me disproves what Alexis is saying. How could it be about anything else? Candy literally says on camera, we're going to cry because we don't get the role we wanted. And so it was I don't know what Alexis is talking. What else could it have been?
I think, well, this kind of speaks to my theory that something is going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. I often say to clients, when we fight with our partners about, leaving the toilet seat up, it's not about the toilet seat. It's about the feelings behind the toilet seat or the cabinet doors being open. That's a personal battle in this house or whatever. It's about feelings of disrespect. It's about feelings of anxiety. It's about feelings of sadness. It's about feelings of not being heard. It's whatever the reason is. And I think, Alexis at one point says, you all don't understand the pressure we're under. She said it in the confessional. She said something like that. So this just sounds like a situation in which these girls are, at this point, it's been 2 to 3 weeks of nonstop taping, probably 12 hours a day. And, that's for some people who aren't used to that. that is a lot for somebody to take. And it sounds like it's a lot for even more than just Alexis to take. They're all under this pressure at this point.
Well, that's why you are the mental health professional, and I am not. All right, back in the workroom, a calmer Alexis is now back at work, while a frustrated Kahana ruminates over the prospect of performing in another acting challenge. After a beat, Kahana announces she's leaving the competition and starts packing her belongings. The cast freaks out as Kahana gathers her things. Later, RuPaul walks into the room and gives the girls a pep talk to get them to finish the competition. This seems to do the trick, and the girls get back to work. Later, Kahana asks Jimbo for acting tips, and Alexis makes an attempt to smooth things over with Candy. Let's stop right there and talk about everything that happened in this workroom part 2, where RuPaul has to come in and, not smash some skulls. What's it called? Crack some. What is the phrase? I don't know.
Crack some heads.
Yeah, I don't know.
Crack some skulls.
What was your take on everything that happened in this workroom part 2?
I want to imagine a world in which a production assistant goes to get RuPaul, who's eating lunch in her trailer, and says, "The show's imploding. We need you on the set."
Well, that wouldn't be a production. That would be literally one of the head producers. A production assistant just gets go get my coffee.
Well, no, but the producers are terrified of Ru, so they send in some poor, intern or something. Send him or her to the lions. This tells me that this conversation is speaking to shit that we're not seeing on the show.
Oh,
whether
really?
It's conflict or because if you'll notice at certain points, all of them are crying except for Jessica, where they all have clearly cried or they are crying on camera, including Candy, because Candy's got the big wet cheeks and the wet eyes at one point. And it just sort of like when Kahana started packing up her stuff, I was very like, wait, what? Another one's leaving? Like, this is crazy. But when you think about it, all of these girls that seem to be having all of this pressure, what seasons were they all in?
Oh, I don't.
They're all later seasons.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And the one queen that seems to be very doing well is Jessica, a season 2 girl. So I'm wondering if this is
who's also older, and we'll get to that in a second.
Well, yes, older, but I'm also wondering if this is a okay, I'm getting ready to say something that I'm going to piss people off, but I wonder if this is a Jessica has worked really hard over the last 20 years and kind of come up from the clubs and stuff like that, whereas you've got a group of girls that maybe haven't had to work as hard because of the acceptance of drag. So now they're being put under significant pressure, and it's getting to all of them. That's probably not a fair thing to say, and I am sure that,
who's getting mad? I was expecting something really awful.
Well, no, because it's basically
like Mommy Dearest. Only old people, like Mommy. Everyone's gonna forget about Mommy Dearest once the old people die.
Well, and this is something where I am probably coming off as very ageist right now, but it is, if anybody has a problem with it, they can write to, what is it, the best of today at gmail.com?
We have an official complaint email line. It's the best of today at gmail.com. And by the way, guys, when we read it, we know their complaints. So you can be as nasty and rude and mean as you want in those emails. Yeah. Because we're prepared. We're mentally prepared, emotionally prepared for those emails when we read it. It's not like we get it out of the blue. So
loins are girded.
Oh, yeah.
When we open that email. Yeah. So I just think that probably may play a role in it. I also think that there were probably things that Ru said that they were never going to show the audience, as far as, I'm going to be supportive, but I'm also just shy of handing you all your contracts and saying, we let one leave, we're not letting anybody else leave, until I decide that they're going. Because it's something about it. It felt very choppy the way they were using all of the things that she says. It didn't feel like it was one long statement, monologue or whatever, to try to bring the girls back together.
I saw this.
What are your thoughts on this?
This morning I read some of the, post-episode discussions on Reddit. Now I just read it for stupidity. No one ever says anything really insightful on these things. So now I'm just really reading it for stupidity. And somebody wrote, and I just, again, the 13-year-olds drive me crazy on this thing. Somebody wrote, RuPaul must have not have been on set when Heidi left because she would have done this then. And I was like, you're such a fucking stupid dummy. First of all, Heidi left on a taping day when they were doing the main stage, so RuPaul was in makeup for sure. But two, one girl quitting, there's a quote from The Importance of Being Earnest. I can't remember what it is, but, it's like, I'm totally bastardizing this. It's like it's talking about an orphan. To lose one parent is like a misfortune, but to lose both seems like carelessness. And I think it's the same thing here where it's like, okay, well, one queen quitting, that's really cool. Two queens quitting, no, now we have a problem. So now RuPaul has to go in and fucking just crack some skulls. That's the phrase. And and do her thing. But let's ultimately start from the beginning. I think what we're seeing here is Kahana can't take the heat. The more you progress, the better you have to be. And Kahana was a girl who, this is a very Roxy Andrews, who should have been out 3 weeks ago. And for whatever reason, she's been carried through 3 weeks longer than she should have been there. And now the competition is at a level that she shouldn't be there. Again, not to bring things back to Tears of the Kingdom.
But you can't help yourself.
But there are certain parts, I can't help myself because it's my whole world trying to save Hyrule. There are certain elements of the show without spoilers where you need to have, in theory, you could go to these places on Tears of the Kingdom, but if you don't have the stamina or the hearts, you're just going to die. You're not going to they're not going to let you go through. There's a part where you have to open a door, not the drag queen, an actual door you open and go through. Again, not the drag queen. And you have to this is late in the game. You have to put your hands on these doors, and in order to open it, you need a lot of hearts. So that's all to prevent people who don't have the hearts from going through. And it's the same thing here. Kahana doesn't have the stamina and the heart containers to go forward in the competition, so she's in the wrong place. But that said, and I have this out. This was supposed to be my last point that I was going to make, but I want to make it now. Ultimately, you don't have these kinds of pep talks with actual all-stars. When you have actual all-stars on a show, you don't need to give these kinds of pep talks because they're all-stars, they're pros. They may be having a rough time, they may be able to handle the pressure, but because they're all-stars, they can work it through it. With the B team, they're going to need a lot of hand-holding. They're going to need a lot of soothing because they don't have ultimately what it takes to go all the way. And so what we saw right there was a tacit admission from RuPaul that I just cast a bunch of people who aren't ready to be here for this.
It's a very good point. You said that much more eloquently than I did.
Yeah. Now, I do want to talk about this fucking Candy Muse, who earlier gets up and she's like, I can't take this drama and the crying because I didn't get a role. And then they cut to a confessional where she's looking around and she goes, bitch, who died? Right? And I wanted to cut an audio clip because then this RuPaul walks in. And she is sobbing like someone didn't give her Takis. Okay? And I wanted to cut in her going, who died? Because, bitch, you just made fun of people for crying for over nothing. I'm not even sure why Candy was crying.
No, that's what I'm saying is I think things were said that we just were not privy to.
You're probably telling me these are not what All-Stars do. Now, have you said everything about this RuPaul moment?
I think other than her saying basically to Kahana, like, have fun, don't throw this opportunity away, and by the way, you're going home. It was apparent to everybody that this was the week that Kahana was going home. Like, even she could have given 1,000% and assured of unless she was the winner of the week, she was going home.
Yeah. So everything said, okay, let's talk about later in the workroom. Kahana now goes to Jimbo, and she's like, Jimbo, you're really good at this stuff. How do you do it? How are you so good at it? What can you give me some tips? And Jimbo gives her, I don't know, some bullshitty tips. Did you have any thoughts on this moment, Taylor?
It felt like a very genuine moment. I thought that there was a willingness there for Jimbo to share something. Like Jimbo wants to see her do well, but I think it's also that whole Bianca Del Rio helping all of the other queens because she's not intimidated by anybody. And I think that's where Jimbo is at this point. Jimbo knows that she is the front runner, and that unless there was a major upset, it is not going to be Kahana as the winner of All Stars 8. So at this point, she kind of throws her a bone and goes, yeah, just do this and just have fun and enjoy yourself and just like kind of let go. So it was a nice moment.
It's a difficult question to answer, and Jimbo answered the best she could, because ultimately it's something you can't teach someone in a one-sentence thing before you do an improv challenge. Because ultimately what it is the difference between Jimbo and Kahana is the reason Jimbo is successful at these challenges, the reason Jimbo is good at this kind of thing, is Jimbo isn't afraid to act a fool and look silly and look stupid and look foolish.
Right.
And that's ultimately what the secret is. Whereas Kahana's all about the beauty and the appearance and her teeth and her ass and her skin. And that's the kind of person who never wants to be shown as foolish or looking foolish or not looking 100% cute and put together. And it reminds me of this. So there's people who don't know, there's this iconic thing, and it exists. No one has ever seen it. So in the 70s, Marlon Brando was broke, I think the 70s. Marlon Brando was broke, so he decided that he was going to do a master class in acting. And it was by invite only. The acting students and some famous people were invited. So like, I know Edward James Olmos was there. Robin Williams was there. Acting students were there. And then they filmed it. And the intent was then to sell these videotapes. And the article I read was talking about how it was such chaos, this thing, that they never released the videotapes. They exist and someone owns them. The estate, or whoever made this, owns these tapes, but they've never been released. But the people who've been there have talked about some of the lessons that they learned from this. And one of them was that when the first appearance of Marlon Brando at this thing, he walked in full drag, went on stage, turned around, and bent over and mooned the audience with his bare ass. Which was very odd, right? And he told the audience that the reason he did this was because everything he did was horrific to him and embarrassing. But that if you want to be an actor, you have to be willing to do those things,
right,
to make yourself look a fool and do things that you don't make you comfortable. That was the lesson there. And it's the same thing here, is you have to be willing to go out there. She's already going out in full drag, but to show your ass and not be afraid. And then that's how you sell it. That's how you're funny. That's how you're good in these scenes. You have to be willing to give it all. And that's something you can't teach someone in 5 minutes. All right, Taylor, we are way overdue for a break. Why don't we take a break? And when we come back, we are going to talk about the rest of the episode. We are back, and now we're going to actually talk about the actual challenge, the Maxi Challenge Forensic Queens, which is a sort of true crime send-up. The thinking is, I think the plot is very thin. It's that Lil Pound Cake, the character that Alaska created with, what was her name, the other girl?
Oh, shit.
I don't remember her name. Some Puerto Rican girl.
I want to say Jaden Dior Fierce, but I know that's not it.
It's Puerto Rican queen from season 5, and Alaska made this doll for a mini challenge named Lil Pound Cake, and it's come up every now and then. And that Lil Pound Cake has been abducted or is missing, and there's all these drag queens who were here for a fictional, unreleased All-Star season who could be the culprits. And then it turns out that the security guard, played by Lala Ree, is the actual culprit because she secretly wanted to be a drag queen on the show. Even though I don't know how if she's never been on the show, how would she be on All-Stars? But I guess look at the cast of All-Stars now, it wouldn't be impossible.
You're looking for logic in a drag race skit.
Logic.
That's your first mistake.
And And so, and in some sort of like sketchy comedy improv thing on like a true crime version of what happened to Lil Pound Cake. What was your take on this, Taylor? Did you have any thoughts? Did you have any feelings and opinions?
Well, I guess the few notes that I had was I didn't quite understand why most of them were doing improv by themselves in the interviews. Like there wasn't really, when you look back at it, there's not a ton of interaction between all of the characters. And I am so glad that we had during the judges' critiques that somebody called Candy out on playing Candy again. Like she doesn't go beyond the scope of that voice, and she doesn't, there's no range there. There's absolutely no range at all. I will say this though. Imagine something like this with last season's All-Stars. Imagine how amazing it would have been with the all-winner season versus what we got.
I was thinking of doing something like this with Lori. Lori. Because I was like, well, what would she and I do if we were doing the same thing? You know, like whatever happened to, you know, Evan Ayers or something like that. He's our version of Lil Pound Cake. And I wonder how that would go. Yeah, especially because yeah, honestly, I don't really know the specifics. Lori does. Lori would be, this isn't, I don't know. She might think this is not real improv. This is not real. I don't know what this is. She'll have a name for what it really was. Look, here's the deal from watching it. I don't know if I timed it a second time. It was a 14-minute, they were really stretching things in this episode. It was a 14-minute bit that should have been 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Jessica and Jimbo were clearly the best for me. Well, they weren't clear. They were the best for me, hands down. Lala Ree was good though, and I guess if you're looking at it, like, we can't give Jimbo another win. We don't want to give okay. She's an acceptable win, but I thought Jessica and Jimbo were the best. And I actually thought people were saying that they thought Kahana was good. I didn't think Kahana was good at all. I thought she was clearly the worst.
Oh, I thought she was actually pretty. If anything, I thought Alexis was the worst.
People said that. I mean, I didn't think she was good, but like honestly, I would have. We can talk about this later. I would have put Candy and Kahana in the bottom.
Oh, see, and I would have put Candy and Alexis.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, there you go. The point is, we all agree that Candy should be there. Well, okay. Well, we'll talk when we get to the main stage. All right. It's Elimination Day, and the girls get ready for the runway. Kahana thanks Jimbo for her help. Candy and Alexis kiss and make up. The girls talk about RuPaul's workroom intervention, and Jessica relishes the fact that the show has given her another chance after the age of 40. Taylor, anything you want to talk about in the Elimination Day?
My concerns were, I was like, oh, this is foreshadowing between the Alexis and Candy moment and the Jimbo and Kahana. I thought one of these girls is sending the other girl home. Mm-hmm. So that's not what ended up working out. But and then one of them, they were talking about Ru coming in, made a comment that said, you know, she didn't have to do that. And my thought was, bitch, yes, she did, because the show was falling apart. So she needed to do something to save the show. But that's cute. One common theme that I have noticed, particularly this season, is the clear direction of the of production. We need one of you to say, well, let's all walk over to the couch now. And we need one of you to say, and none of these girls are very good at it looking very natural. Like, wow, can you believe RuPaul came in and talked to us today? Yeah, wasn't that amazing? I can't believe that. She didn't have to do that, you know. You're right, she didn't. It's a lot of it is, it's very forced, and it takes away from the enjoyment of the show.
Well, it goes back to they're not all stars. They're just not.
Right.
You know what? I had a sort of not different take, but I saw something. I think I picked up on something. I'm going to phrase it that way. I picked up on something that, like, Kahana, I think, knew she was going home, and there seemed to be a peace about it. She seemed very peaceful, knowing she was going home, and she seemed to be at peace with that. And you could see it even then. There's this tension and anxiety and like general uncomfortableness about Kahana seemed to have dissipated on that Elimination Day, where she was like, it is what it is, and I'm probably going home. And It may have even been a thing where the producers told her, like, look, we know you want to go home. Just make it through this episode and we'll give you your wish. But just finish this episode for us.
That's a good point. That might have happened.
We were supposed to talk about this last week, and then Jessica brought it up again, and I ran out of time. I didn't bring it up, and we kind of did lip service to it last week. But Jessica brought it up again this week, so now it's relevant, about life in your 40s. And there seems to be a belief among drag queens specifically and gay men that it used to be, I feel like this is a case, not in a good way, that 40 is the new 30. But I remember a long time ago, gay men just really turning 30 was like the worst thing to happen to them. And like they would be really depressed. And I'm like, no, that's the greatest thing to happen to you is to turn 30, right? And I'm going to say this as I start to see the 40s in my sunsetting for me. Mm-hmm. The 40s were just as good as the 30s. I mean, the only difference might be that I had more stomach problems, you know?
Yeah.
But the 40s, when you are a gay person, and it could be a lesbian or whatever, and anybody, you know, it can be straight. For people who don't have children, it's a different experience, and it's a very rewarding experience, and it's amazing. And so Jessica's having this talk, but she comes from a world of drag queens where to them, because this is something where Chad Michaels was 42 on her season. They were acting like she was Grandma Moses, you know? Mm-hmm. By the way, no one would ever dare, you know, RuPaul's like in her 60s and no one says shit. But so like Jessica having to address this, but did you want to talk? I know we talked about this a little bit, but did you want to talk about life in your 40s or what it's like? We have a lot of young listeners. Are you sad that once you and I die, that all old movies and anything pre 1993 will vanish into thin air?
No one will watch Xanadu again. No one will watch Mommy Dearest again. It's horrible.
Man. Anyway, you want to talk about life in your 40s?
I turned 50 this year, and my 40s were amazing. Everything you said is true. There is a freedom that comes with in your 30s in which you have a lot of, you have a lot more experience under your belt. And in your 40s, you have even more experience, and you also don't give a fuck anymore. It's not like where you don't necessarily worry what people will think. You don't necessarily, you don't feel the need to have to be in the middle of everything because you're afraid you're going to miss something. The FOMO sort of goes away at your 40s because you're doing your own thing. And the only issue was that I definitely had more health issues in my 40s than I did in my 30s or my 20s. But that also is attributed to how well you took care of yourself in the years before, plus some genetics as well. But I loved my 40s. I'm looking forward to my 50s. I think my 50s could be just as great.
I've loved the 40s. But yeah, for those of you listening, if you're gay, oh my gosh, I just dropped the pen. What Jessica's talking about, like, she's like, I'm so grateful to be in my 40s and do XYZ. And I'm like, well, I guess there is a perception in drag queen land that like, oh, you have to be young and stuff like that. I will say this. When you do hit your 40, you see like someone like Georges do a death drop and you're like, oh, you're like,
yeah. Is she going to jump from there? Yeah, it's very much that. But I think that unfortunately, part of the reason for that is this show. Is, as we have seen, when you look at the ages of the majority of the queens in the first couple of seasons, it was nothing to have multiple queens in their 30s or late 20s. Now we've got queens that are like, what is it? Crystal Versace was like 18 and she won the crown. So we're seeing the numbers. So that is becoming the standard for drag, is that you have to be one of these young girls that can do all of these shablams and death drops and duck walks and all this kind of stuff. And it's leaving a huge part of drag culture behind. That really shouldn't be. It should be revered. Somebody like Jessica, who's been doing drag for 20 years, or Chad Michaels, or one of these other girls, should be respected. Yeah. Whether or not you like their drag, they have kept with it for 20 something years.
I just looked it up and Candy Ho is 35. they have to do a thing, but they bring her on the same season as this Lux Noir London. And Lux, who knows her drag history, should be like, how old are you? Because I think even Tempest du Jour was only in her like maybe mid 40s, right? Or early 40s.
No, I remember she was like 51.
Oh, when she was on, she was like 51. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. How old are you? And you're like, oh, okay, well, we're doing that, huh?
Yeah.
All right. Now it's time to talk about Taylor's favorite part, the looks category is Miss Fill in the Blank. Taylor, why don't you go ahead and tell us all your thoughts on the looks?
I thought I can go through these really quickly. I thought Jessica's was okay. Mm-hmm. She was doing Miss Sausage Party. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised, though they did do it later. I wrote down, nobody said you're a wiener baby.
Oh. Well, they did. Okay. Jessica was doing that joke, but because of her accent, wiener and winner sounded exactly the same.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I thought Kahana's was beautiful. I thought it was a beautiful dress. And Kahana always looked beautiful coming down the runway. Lala's was funny. I thought it was a funny, campy look. I was surprised, though, when she was saying, with them talking about her being Miss Bootlegger? Was that it? That I was waiting for what'd she call me? And they never did that.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking the same thing. They went with I don't even know her joke, which is another one of their go-tos.
Yeah. Candy looked ridiculous.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Candy looked like a linebacker. Yeah. Alexis, I thought this was a really funny look from Alexis. I thought this was a really great look from Alexis. She looked pretty, but that is like high camp drag at that point. Where, and the fact that the top of the dress was a jock strap and that it was, piss soaked at the bottom and everything about it was just very, very not what we expect from Alexis. And I loved it. I thought it possibly was my favorite look of the night.
Look at you.
And Jimbo, I just wrote, oh, wow, tits. Like, okay, great. We got it. You have lots of tit bits.
When I signed on today, Taylor said that when the camera turned on. He went, oh, wow, tits. And I was like, that's really
oh, wow,
mean.
Tits.
Any other thoughts on the looks?
No, that was it.
All right, very good. On the main stage, Alexis and Kahana are in the bottom, while Lala Ree is named the top All-Star of the week. As the top All-Star, Lala Ree is forced to duke it out against this week's lip-sync assassin, Georges, who I believe is from season 14. The song, About Damn Time by Lizzo. In the end, Lala Ree was named the winner and revealed that she had decided to send home Kahana Montrese. Taylor the Latte Boy, any final thoughts on the episode?
No, I think that this was probably one of the better episodes just because there was actual drama. But once the drama was over, it sort of petered out.
Mm-hmm. Look, here's the thing is I just want to say one thing. The judging, and this is continuing a trend that we've seen on this show, makes absolutely zero sense. Now, personally for me, Candy and Kahana were the worst. That's my thing, but I'm not a judge on RuPaul's Drag Race. But if you were to listen to the judges and believe the edit and everything that you're seeing there, Kahana got fair, safe type critiques, and Candy got terrible critiques. They essentially were, we don't like your outfit, and you were terrible in the challenge. You were just doing Candy Muse. Kahana was praised mostly, and on both fronts, on the challenge and on the look. Kahana, you're in the bottom. Candy, you're safe. Which again goes to me, which was they just made a promise to Kahana, like, you can go home. We'll just finish the episode for us. And that's probably why we saw her at peace. She knew she just had to play it out and go through with it and have one last hurrah. That's my take on it, because how are you saying you were good? And they were saying it in a way that they knew she was going home. So they were like, oh, you were wonderful. Nice to see you grow and go to. That's the shit that they say when it's like the final three, with nothing but praise.
Yeah.
So that's sort of my take on that. Do you have any other thoughts before we call it a day, Taylor?
Well, kind of to speak on what you're talking about, Rue at one point comments to Candy, you're kind of just doing the same. You're doing Candy, which wasn't what the role called for. But I love Candy, so that's fine. if anybody else had done that, they would have got read to filth.
Yeah, but that also feeds into Candy's keep doing it because she's like, well, RuPaul likes it, which she's not wrong. RuPaul just openly said, and she's the lead judge, that I like it. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep on keeping on.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Nah.
Well, invariably, I always, as soon as we publish this episode, I'm like, oh, why didn't I say this? Or why didn't I say that? Or I read something online or something happened. So I'm going to make a plug right now for the show, especially after all the shit I just talked on my co-host on Rulaska Thoughts. It's going to be a Rulaska Thoughts you're not going to want to miss. It comes out Wednesday morning, I believe. Yes, in your feed, either free or on Patreon. So make sure and check out Rulaska Thoughts. I think this week's going to be a really good one, especially with all the shit that I just talked. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of RuPaul's Drag Race Recap. Be sure to join us next week and every week as we continue to discuss, dissect, and deconstruct each brand new episode of RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars Season 8. So for Taylor the Latte Boy and myself,
sashay away until next week.
Thank you for listening to Drag Race Recap. Have something to say? Leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/afterthoughtmedia. You can also email us at dragracerecap@afterthought.media. For more Drag Race and LGBTQ content, support us over at patreon.com/afterthoughtmedia. You can also watch video versions of the show and more over at youtube.com/dragracerecap. This podcast was produced by Luke Stamen. Taylor the Latte Boy has another podcast. It's called Pod is My Co-Pilot, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow Taylor on Instagram at PIMCTaylor. Follow Joe Betance on Instagram and TikTok at Joe Betance. Special thanks to these expensive tier Patreon supporters: Alex S., Anonymous, April Pacheco, Astute Girl, Brad Coley, Carter McKinnon, Corinna Williamson, Doofus Maximus, E. Smith, Elizabeth Timmer, Emma, Humble Pie, J. Thomas Plank, Jesse Harris, Kathy Zender, Lauren Eckert, Lucy Carrasco, Luke Stamen, Mike Yeager, Nikki Baker, Poppy Woods, Ricardo Herrera, Robert NYC, Robin Eganberger, Runner Brandon, Sarah Yu, Tom Bombs, Travi Cosmos, Troy Anderson, Zach Nelson. Drag Race Recap is an Afterthought Media podcast.